Yo, what's up, Bo?
Yo, you want to learn about the history of life? Yo, let me teach you, alright? So, we're going to be covering chapter 18. So, the first checkpoint of chapter 18 is about how the ages of organisms can be determined by the dating of fossils and the sedimentary rock strata in which they are found. Usually, the ages of the oldest rocks cannot be determined by direct observation, and we have to tell the ages of rocks relatively. This means that we usually tell the age of a specific rock relative to the age of rocks a layer above or below it, and the oldest of layers of rock or strata will always lie deeper in the soil, and successively higher strata or younger layers of rock will always lie shallower in the soil. Additionally, there are three types of stratigraphy, or the branch of geography concerned with the order and position of strata in relation to the geological timescale. The first principle is that organisms found in younger strata are more similar to modern organisms than those found in older ones. For example, the mammoth is more similar to the modern elephant than the prehistoric dinosaur. The second principle is that certain fossils are always found in younger strata and not in older ones. For example, mammoth fossils will always be found in shallower in the earth than dinosaur fossils. Lastly, fossils of similar organisms are widely spread across the earth. For example, in human ancestor fossils, such as Homo habilis and Homo erectus, though similar and both related from a common ancestor, can be found in different continents. So the second checkpoint of 18.1 that we will be covering is about radiometric dating techniques, or techniques used to date the age of fossils in rocks using half-lives of certain elements found in the fossil, such as uranium or carbon. First of all, you may be wondering, what is half-life? Well, half-life is a specific time interval in which half of the atoms in a radioisotope or in radioactive and unstable isotope will decay to become stable. Usually, the use of half-life to date the age of fossils in rocks is known as radiometric dating. An example of radiometric dating we will be discussing today is the decay of carbon-14, a radioactive isotope of carbon that will cease to be produced once the organism dies, as the organism will stop exchanging carbon compounds with its environment after its death. Carbon-14 decays through the reaction of its neurons with nitrogen-14, and it is known that carbon-14 has a half-life of 5,700 years. And by comparing the amount of carbon-14 with the amount in living organisms, the age of a fossil can be easily determined. However, carbon-14 can only be used to date fossils that are less than 60,000 years old, and past that point, too little carbon-14 will remain, yielding less accurate results. For fossils lower than 60,000 years old, we can use other radioisotopes, such as uranium and potassium. Here is also a diagram on half-life, and it just shows how how each radioisotope decays across time. Okay, the last checkpoint of 18.1 we will be covering is how geologists divide the history of life into eons, periods, or eras based on differences in how fossils are found to be assembled into different layers of strata. First of all, what is a geological timescale? The geological timescale is what scientists develop to relate time to geological strata and covers the entire history of the Earth. This broad history of Earth life is divided into 4 eons, or 4 major eras of geological time that are large categories of periods. The first 3 eons are collectively referred to as the Precambrian time, or simply the Precambrian, and includes the Hadean, Archean, and Proterozoic. Although the Precambrian era was much longer in total than the Phanerozoic era, or the most recent 0.5 billion years. It was during the Phanerozoic eon that multicellular organisms rapidly diversified.
Okay.
Now we will be covering 18.2, and the first checkpoint is about plate tectonics, or the geophysics of the movement of major land masses that explained Wegener's continental drift theory, which theorizes the movement of continental plates. Continental drift is usually caused by convection currents in the magma that move plates and continents which seemingly float on top of the magma. There are several results of continental drifts. For example, the process in which a thinner oceanic plate is forced under a thicker continental plate is known as subduction, and subduction usually results in mountain and volcanic formation. Say if this creek was an ocean and the rock here was a land, the creek bed would be pushed under the rock in subduction because the land plate is usually thicker than the ocean plate. And here's also a picture of subduction, which the thinner oceanic plate is pushed under the thicker land plate. But another scenario is that, for example, the Himalaya mountain range, and this is when both or two continental plates collide with one another, and because they are both thick, they are instead pushed up against one another, causing really high ridges. And some of these dramatic changes in Earth's physical nature, such as moving the plates, will cause mass extinctions and climate change. So the second topic of 18.2 that we will be talking about is about how major physical events on both Earth and extraterrestrial events have affected the history of life here. First of all, rapid temperature changes can cause mass extinctions, particularly of marine organisms that require water. Additionally, volcanic eruptions, especially large ones, have had major consequences for life on Earth and have caused mass extinctions. For example, volcanoes like Krakatau, a volcano in Indonesia that erupted in 1883, ejected a huge amount of sulfur dioxide gas, creating a parasol effect, or the high concentration of sulfurous acid in high altitude clouds following volcanic eruptions that lower the Earth's temperature. These lowering in temperatures may have effect on organisms, such as when organisms can find food or mate. In addition to volcanoes and temperature changes, extraterrestrial events such as meteors of all sizes striking Earth each year have also caused mass extinctions. For example, a meteor is believed to have ended the Cretaceous and caused a mass extinction then. And here is also a picture of Krakatau, the volcano in Indonesia that erupted in 1883 that caused a temperature drop. Yeah, and this is likely the sulfurous acid that was eventually ejected into the clouds. So the last topic of 18.2 that we will be talking about is how oxygen-generating cyanobacteria liberated enough oxygen to initiate oxidation reactions in metabolic pathways, allowing aerobic organisms such as us to harvest more energy than anaerobic organisms, which is a reason why now I am here and I can breathe oxygen to produce more energy than some anaerobic organism. And this is due to the increases in atmospheric oxygen concentrations that supported the evolution of large eukaryotic cells and eventually multicellular organisms. So how did this occur? Well, the first step of this atmospheric increase in oxygen occurred about 2.5 billion years ago, when ancestors of the modern cyanobacteria learned to use water as a source of hydrogen ions for photosynthesis. They generated oxygen as a waste product, and then about a billion years later after that, the first eukaryotes appeared after enough oxygen was produced. Eventually, not just aerobic organisms, but also anaerobic prokaryotes evolved the ability to tolerate oxygen gas.
Now we will be talking about the evidence geologists primarily use in order to determine the characteristics of Earth and its living organisms at varying times throughout history. Fossils. In order to record the Earth's history, scientists have made use of fossil record. Biologists, having divided the history of Earth into respective eons, eras, and periods, are able to study the particular biota, or all organisms present at a particular time or place, more easily through the extensive study of fossils from that given time period. While there are already 300,000 named species of fossil organisms, that number is far from the total number of species that have ever lived on Earth, because there are already at least 10 million species living on Earth in the present-day biota. The reason for this phenomenon is that fossils are extremely rare and require specific circumstances in order to be preserved. For instance, corpses quickly decompose in oxygen-rich environments and must be transported to locations that have a lack of oxygen. Then the fossils must survive certain geological processes that have the potential to destroy fossils. The remaining fossils left to be discovered by paleontologists are very precious because they are heavily relied, combined with knowledge about the physical changes on Earth, in order to interpret most of the history of the evolution of life on Earth. And so, it looks like I found a fossil over here.
Ooh,
Wow.
what is it?
Wow, it
Wow.
seems to be...
What kind of fossil is that?
I think it's a fossil of a spider from the Cretaceous eon.
Ooh.
Yeah. Good. Next, we will talk about the facts that geologists have discovered about life on Earth. Long, long ago, in fact, 3.8 billion years ago to be exact, life first appeared. This marked the beginning of the Precambrian period, where life was mostly very small and aquatic. In the Cambrian explosion, however, multicellular life diversified, creating what many would consider evolutionary radiation. So for more than 3 billion years, all organisms lived in shallow seas, which contained mostly microscopic prokaryotes such as plankton. Not until 1.5 billion years ago, small multicellular organisms and the first eukaryotes first began feeding on microorganisms. However, there was insufficient oxygen gas levels to support diverse eukaryotic life in the Precambrian period. Now, you might be aware that most life today is neither aquatic nor extremely small, but that's where the Cambrian explosion comes in. Due to increases in oxygen gas levels, the Earth was able to support much more varied forms of life. The Cambrian explosion was a geologically rapid diversification of life that took place, causing many new forms to appear in a relatively very short amount of time. Right. Next, we will be talking about the remaining individual periods of the Paleozoic era: the Ordovician, the Silurian, the Devonian, Carboniferous, and Permian periods. Each period has its own characteristics, and the ends of the Ordovician, Devonian, and Permian periods were all marked by mass extinctions, which we will explore in depth in our next section. In the Permian period, all the continents merged to form the supercontinent known as Pangaea. Following the Paleozoic era was the Mesozoic era, a time where biotas of newly separated continents began to diverge and oceans flooded continental shelves. The Mesozoic era is also divided into 3 periods: Triassic, the Jurassic, and the Cretaceous period. You might recognize these names as periods when the dinosaurs ruled the Earth, and you'd be correct, because during those time periods, most of the large terrestrial predators and herbivores were dinosaurs, such as the Tyrannosaurus rex and Triceratops, and other dinosaurs you might have known from movies such as Jurassic Park. While reptiles continued to diversify, Pangaea became fully divided once again into the continents of Gondwana in the south and Laurasia in the north during the Triassic era. Finally, in the Cretaceous period, temperatures increased and more mammals began to appear in large numbers. Next, we will be talking about the 5 episodes of mass extinction that appeared throughout the history of life in the Paleozoic and Mesozoic eras. Number 1. Around 3/4 of all animal species were extinct because of environmental changes at the end of the Ordovician period. Number 2. Meteors probably caused another massive extinction that eliminated about another 3/4 of all marine species at the end of the Devonian period. Number 3. The third massive extinction occurred at the end of the Permian period, in which the decay of forests led to extremely low concentrations of oxygen, which led to the 96% of the extinction of all multicellular species. Number 4. The fourth massive extinction occurred at the end of the Triassic period, in which 65% of all species became extinct. And finally, the fifth and final mass extinction occurred at the end of the Cretaceous era, which ended up wiping the last of the dinosaurs. The final era we will talk about is the Cenozoic era. This era continues on the present day and is the most recent era. It is further divided into the Tertiary and the Quaternary periods, which are in turn divided into separate epochs. This era saw the emergence of the modern biotas as mammals radiated extensively and flowering point plants became dominant. During Tertiary period, the Indian subcontinent drifted upwards, creating the Himalayas. Earth's climate cooled down and became drier in the middle of the Tertiary era, and many lineages of flowering plants evolved, herbaceous forms and grasslands spread throughout the earth. Quaternary period was divided into two sub-epochs, the Pleistocene and the Holocene. During the Pleistocene, primates resulted in the evolution of the hominoid lineage and caused many extinctions. The final topic we will talk about of Chapter 18.3 is about the Tree of Life, which is used to reconstruct the timing of evolutionary events. First of all, biologists rely mainly on the phylogenetic information in the Tree of Life to reconstruct major events in history, such as the evolution of legs and the transition from water to land. Phylogeny can also be used in combination with fossil record to reconstruct timing of major events. Besides, phylogeny in the Tree of Life, gene sequences in extinct species can be reconstructed to determine relatedness among different organisms. Still, how do extinct species affect the species we see today? Well, it is well known that changes in the Earth's physical environment has produced a profound effect on which organisms we are currently seeing. By the way, I found another fossil.
Ooh.
Yeah, this one looks like it's a dragonfly, also from the Cretaceous period.
There are a lot of
yes, it
Cretaceous
is.
periods here.
Yeah, we should
think-
start an
yeah.
excavation.
Yeah.